Hi, folks. So just a show of hands, how many of you have seen the show Hamilton? Anybody? So actually, not too bad. It's a pretty nerdy crowd. I wasn't sure. But about 10 years ago, I was going to go and see Hamilton in New York City, and we had bought tickets in advance, bought it not from the theater, so we paid a good amount of money. And we show up there, and the guy who wrote it was starring in it, Lin-Manuel Miranda. And we got there, and it wasn't him. He was replaced. So we were kind of bummed. So you're about to experience the same thing. Krista was supposed to be here, and you're stuck with me. So I apologize on Krista's behalf. He was feeling under the weather, so he asked me to step in. So hopefully I do this justice. But welcome, and we're going to talk a little bit about what we've done and where we're going. Hello? There we go. And I didn't know these were builds, so now I know. So the State of the Union's strong. It's just an amazing environment. We have 75 groups, about 25 of them are making specs. We have a broad base of contributors, everywhere from IoT, embedded kind of things, all the way up to HPC and supercomputers. Wow, I didn't press a button on that one. So last year we had, Google kind of full support of Android on RISC-V. It's amazing. There's a lot of involvement by the Google folks in our groups and making sure that Android's going to work the best possible. A lot of semi companies are going public on their move to RISC-V. I mean, we just saw folks who joined the board over a period of time, people like Imagination Tech and Qualcomm and other folks. But we saw Synopsys here making a big move, right? That's amazing. They were doing the ARC stuff. Now they're doing also doing RISC-V, and it's an incredible investment on their part, and I think it's going to make it possible for even more deployments around RISC-V. So RISC-V continues to proliferate, everything, everywhere, but maybe not at once. So you should understand that the ramp for different products is different. So if you're talking about IoT and embedded, you can actually put out a processor in about 6 months and deploy it, right? It's really cool. All of a sudden you go up to disk drives, and we know from the disk drive manufacturers, once the technology is ready, it's about 1.5 years to go ahead and get that in the hands of users. We now have Seagate shipping products with RISC-V, and it's really exciting. Servers, more like 3 to 5 years. Now, we're doing all the work around servers, and it works on QEMU, and it works on a bunch of the SBCs. Somebody asked me, what's the thing that you've liked the best at the summit so far? And I got to tell you, I really liked the table with all the single board computers on there, and laptops and pads and everything else. So all those things help people get there. We've talked with automotive, and Barcelona, the automotive SIG had a meeting. They said, okay, how long will it take before this stuff really shows up as primary processors in automotive? And they said, really, it's the minimum is 2028. They have a lot of certifications. So you got to understand that there is work being done at all levels. This is not like other architecture. So, you talk about ARM in the 90s, started as kind of the bottom, and then here you fast forward to, was 2019 or something, and they have a Fujitsu supercomputer. We've learned from all that. Every strata of computer science is being worked on simultaneously. almost everybody who's working in RISC-V worked on other architectures. So it's all being worked on. It just takes some time to come out. So we've evolved, right? Initially, we just wanted a base ISA, so that we could go ahead and, the work initially in Berkeley and then eventually going out to the community. And then, we've, in general, have worked very heavily with the software ecosystem in order to make sure all the pieces are there. Luckily, we have a huge contingent of people who are working on things like LLVM and GCC. And, look, I don't know what you do in the morning, but I get up and I look at my Google feed and I look at LinkedIn, and every single day I see some new announcement. And AI is going crazy with RISC-V. It's just amazing. And so really, there isn't a piece of computer science that isn't being worked on for RISC-V. And there were a lot of proprietary ISAs, both in the US and Asia and Europe. They're going by the wayside. People are reevaluating and bringing on RISC-V, and it's just, it's incredible. Those people are all contributing. So we have a massive amount of folks in various countries who are working on compilers, they're working on proofs of concept, they're working on operating systems, and that's because they've all moved to RISC-V. So why is that? Well, it turns out that even in today's day and age, it's hard for any company, I don't care how big they are, to go ahead and do the whole ecosystem around a new architecture. The reason why we're a community at all is because we share the effort. We share the effort to define common implementations, but more importantly, the software ecosystem. When I first started in RISC-V 3.5 years ago, we had 15 groups and 95% of them were ISA. Now we have like 70 groups and 75% of them are non-ISA. The hardware software interface, trusted execution environments, RAS support, QoS support. That's because we benefit as a community by sharing the effort in the whole software ecosystem. And so this is Chris's words, and it's really kind of cool. I kind of feel it's hard for me to say this because it seems egotistical, but all your cores belong to us. It's true. Every time that there's some kind of, sort of greenfield opportunity or a next revision of use of a chip, people always evaluate RISC-V these days. So let's take a look at what we did in 2023. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. There's 12 up here. And you're going to see the slide next about what's coming next. But we can go all the way to 18 this year. There's about 6 that are sitting out there that are very close to ratification. This is a huge amount of work. Since the second half of 2021, you, all have gotten 34 specifications ratified. No other standards organization has done this amount of work in this little bit of time. And that's really thanks to all of you. But there's 3 here that I want to talk about that are really big and have taken multiple years in order to get out. The first is vector crypto. Probably about a 4-year effort. Had to wait a little bit on vector. We did scalar crypto in the meantime, but they've been working on that a long time. That was an incredible amount of work to get done. The second one I want to bring up is profiles, which actually aren't even on here. And they, I think I had that first conversation with Krista in August of 2020. And it got ratified in March. This is really critical and really important. We're going to talk about this in a second. And then the final one is IOMMU. So an incredible job done by the chair and the vice chair, Ved from Revos and Perrine from Sci5. There were 5 specs that came in fully formed when this group started. And they got it down to 1 spec, and everybody's really psyched about what's there. So what's coming next? I mean, there's a bunch of things that are here, but I will tell you that the one that the technical steering committee, and if you came to the first day, to Tuesday, and listened to all the keynotes, the one that sticks out, the one that everybody wants, the one that everybody wants yesterday is Matrix. Okay, and we have some incredible people. We have Zosa, who's the chair from IBM. We have Abel, who's the vice chair from Esperanto, and they're working on 2 different matrix task groups. One's going to be in 32 bits, very akin to vector, and it will come out much more quickly. And then there will be a broader one that will be a bigger matrix implementation that likely will be 64-bit instructions, and that will take a little bit longer to do. But this is really critical for AI and ML, and we talked a little bit about that before. So it's really critical that we get those things done. But if you take a look at the raft of other things, it's huge. And because we've built a scalable organization, it's easy to go ahead and distribute that responsibility and have people come up with good ideas. The other thing that's happening very clearly, and you see some of the items up here, is in security. So things like trusted execution, things like thwarting micro-architectural side channel attacks, things like runtime integrity, control flow integrity. All those things are happening, and they're going to happen over the next couple of years. Again, when I started, there were 2 groups really in security. There's the crypto acceleration and the PMP stuff. And now we're up to about 15 groups that are actively working on specifications. And as everybody knows, look, all this other stuff is good, but if you don't have security, it just doesn't matter, right? So an incredible amount of work that's in progress. And every day we get people coming and saying, well, we need this as well. So we have a thing called fast tracks, where you don't have to go through the whole process, but we still are really, really clear about quality. You have to have a proof of concept. You have to dot the I's and cross the T's and do all those things. And we've done an incredible number of fast tracks. One of them recently is compare and swap. It may not be the most risk kind of thing out there, but it's also something that every other architecture has, and we have to have it as well. So the ecosystem's amazing. First of all, I just want to put out a kudo to RISE. They stepped in and are shoring up our efforts in the open source world. I think they're either giving a talk today or they gave a talk yesterday about what their progress is and what they're doing. We're so grateful for them for doing that. But there's also an incredible amount of work that's being done directly with the upstream projects. There's a bunch of work that's being done by other organizations. We have relationships with places like Kronos doing the graphics and the AI and ML libraries with the security folks and so on and so forth. This is critical. If we don't make sure that these things are not only in there, but also optimized for RISC-V where appropriate, that's going to be a big issue. And so please, if you have interest in this area, let's make sure that you get involved and help us do these things. We've also hired a director of software ecosystem, Isaac, who's sitting in the audience, and he's working on getting a clearinghouse in place for all software, commercial, open source, et cetera, so you don't have to erect or set everything together yourself. You can easily find things. And we're going to be going after pieces of the ecosystem that haven't tuned specifically to RISC-V or aren't ported to RISC-V in order to bring them in and make sure that all that stuff happens. And there's this little green thing on the side, which is a little bigger than the rest, Android. Very clearly, very important to us. You heard Philip talk about emulation. A lot of the Android apps were compiled natively. It's hard to get a zillion app writers to go ahead and recompile. So things like that are also very critically important to us. So we very clearly have a bunch of people who know Linux and a bunch of people who know Android. Those are the two biggest ecosystems that we are involved with. A little bit more of the RTOS side. I mean, we go ahead and we support a bunch of RTOSes. RT Thread, I gave a talk there this past year. They work with all these boards, these SBCs that are in the expo hall. Those are important, but what happens is a lot of times when you're talking about these individual products, they are specifically running one application. We're concentrating very heavily on general purpose computing with multi-user kind of things in order to make sure that that shared bit of work actually comes through to support RISC-V. And I'm going to show you in a second some of the work we're doing in order to support that. So there's this thing called profiles. If you think about generational set of instructions that belong together, so either like a generation of Xeon or a version of ARM, we now have profiles. It was, again, ratified this year. And the first one we ratified was one targeted specifically towards general purpose computing, towards a market that has, apps that get sold or supported in open source. But we have a whole bunch of options. So there's things like local options. So if you're doing vector crypto and you're in China, you're going to do the Chinese algorithms. If you're in the US, you're going to do the NIST algorithms. And those will never, ever be mandatory because it depends on the locale that you're in. We have development options. So there's new extensions, and they evolve in the optional space until we decide whether they're mandatory or not. And then there are things that require a large amount of overhead, and we don't expect them to ever become mandatory. And then there are things that are transitions and may be dropped over time. So the profiles have worked very hard to go ahead and have, the fewest mandatory options that people need in order to really share the tool chain and share the operating systems. So what are profiles? So there are these things called bases, which are the basic instructions. These are when you hear about the smallest set of RISC-V instructions. These are those. There's RV32i, which is a 32-bit wide register, and RV64i. We have profiles based on them. They're called RVI. The third letter is the family name. And then from there, most of our work has been targeting, as I said, the application space. So you'll see we have quite a bit of work that's going on here. There's going to be a marketing release name. The RVA names are kind of nerdy, right? And so there's a release name that the marketing folks are working on. And there's one group, which is the stuff that was done in basically before the beginning of 2020. And the other group is going to probably extend into 2024. And when you start marketing those things, so let's say, release 1 had all its stuff. Release 2 is going to market not just the stuff that's in the latest profile, but everything since the last major release. And so, things like vector and vector crypto and IOMMU, those things will all be, part of release 2. And then in the future, we have more families. So RVB is basically A with a little less stuff. So like, for example, making vector optional instead of mandatory. RVM is intended at the microcontroller world. We've worked very heavily with the Sherry folks, and we are going for wider instructions. And then finally, the last thing, highest priority for H1 2024 is platforms. This is like SBSA for ARM or the server-ready stuff. And we're working very heavily on this. Andre Warkentin is the task group chair from Intel, who's working on putting together, the acting chair who's putting together how we are going to put these pieces. Everything with a check mark is a component of this. So I hope this gives you like a pretty good idea about what we're doing and what's going on. And I think the sky's the limit. It's just amazing. And I think the last thing I'd like to say again is thank you to all of you, because you're the ones that make all this happen. Thank you.